Okay, we are on filmsgonewild.com. My name is John Wildman, and we are going to talk about the film Turn of the Screw. We have Alex Gavin here, who's the director of the film, which is screening at the Lake Travis Film Festival. Alex, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be part of the festival, so I'm looking forward to chatting with you about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let's start off this way. We usually have our filmmaker introduce our audience to the film. They have not seen it as yet. So why don't you describe Turn of the Screw to our audience?
Sure thing. So this is an adaptation of a classic Henry James short story, The Turn of the Screw. So Henry James is a famous American-British novelist at the turn of the 20th century. And the original story, it's often considered the first original ghost story. And it's about a governess who's looking after two orphaned children in an English country mansion. And she begins to suspect the previous governess who's passed away, her ghost might actually be trying to get the souls of the children. So she begins this kind of cat and mouse game with this ghostly governess. And but you're never quite sure if the ghosts are real or whether maybe she's having some issues with her own imagination. But my version is actually set in a New Zealand theatre. So the idea is that an actress, the night before a play is about to begin of The Turn of the Screw, a replacement actress comes to the theatre to fill in. And the director actually puts on a full dress rehearsal for this actress in an empty theatre at 11 o'clock at night. And so we actually see the story from this actress as she actually takes on the role. But as she does it, she begins to suspect that not everything in the theatre could actually be as is planned. So it's sort of a story within a story with a few twists.
Exactly, exactly. I enjoyed it. I really love the style of it. And, it reminded me of Peter Strickland's Berberian Sound Studio. It reminded me of some of the older British films like Dead of Night and those films. I was talking about the film with Deb Shapiro, who you'll be talking to later, and I was saying, I love how horror fits under such a large umbrella, because what scares us, what fills us with dread, that it's not always about blood and gore. Sometimes it's about our heads, sometimes it's about our perception, and this, I think, really highlights that this is very much a horror film, but not the horror film that many people would dismiss because it's a horror film, because you're sneaky. You give us a lot of style and you give us a lot of context before you scare the crap out of us.
Thank you. No, I think that's a good summation. And yeah, it's kind of like a horror movie for people who don't like horrors, because it's really suspense is the word that I like. And yeah, it's funny, here in New Zealand, horror is actually the least well-performing genre, so it's quite hard to get people to see horror. And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know if I want to see it, but then they go in and they actually like, oh, I get it now. It isn't just. And look, I think that gore horrors have their place and they can be a thing of beauty. But this is very much, as I say, it's about a character drama. It's got suspense. It does have some elements of horror to it. But I think it's something that I'd like to think is much broader. And that's quite tricky when you have to put things into genre categories.
Right.
But yes, it's also, I think, for people who have an interest in the performing arts and theatre as well, even though it's because we do look into that world and behind the scenes of that as well. And I've done quite a lot of theatrical stuff, and I can assure you that being in the theatre in the middle of the night when there's no one around can be pretty damn scary. So.
Oh yeah. Anybody who's had to close out a theater and turn the lights off, they know exactly what you're talking about.
Totally.
Let talk about the visuals of the film to make that interesting, to shoot a stage in an interesting way, because for you to succeed, to put us in the right mindset and the right journey, you have to, just like our actress, our lead character in the film, you have to get us so wrapped up into what's going on that we forget where we are. So talk about your approach and your work with your production designers, and your DP to achieve that.
Sure. So basically, yeah, the 95% is set in this theatre. And that was actually, we only shot in a real theatre for 3 hours. The rest was actually created on a soundstage, which I had access to. So, I mean, this story really, this is my third feature film. And I've had this idea for quite a long time, but I knew that if we did it the right way, we could do it to a very high standard, but on a very limited budget. But because I sort of wanted to celebrate that it was this enclosed, feeling and have that claustrophobic feeling to it. So generally, it's a black background, and then we have the sets come down and minimal props and sets, but very specific ones. And then there's a lot of use with smoke and changes of camera angle and perspectives to make it feel that cinematic feel. And sound was everything in this film. So our sound designers did an incredible job. But I mean, every sound you hear was put in later. And I've always believed that, as long as you get sound to a great level, it kind of tricks the mind in a wonderful way as well and focuses that. And so it was actually quite useful that, like if there's a mirror that I wanted to focus on, we can have that as the full part of the frame, and then the sound to help with that. But no, I had a magnificent production designer. Her name's Debbie Fish, and she's done a huge amount of theatre and film, and she also does sort of stage and events as well. And we really talked about the aesthetics and the color palette for it. And also Mark Papali'i, who was our cinematographer. We shot the whole film in 10 days, so it was a very tight shoot. So there was a huge amount of rehearsal first, and then we got in, and then, there's quite a few scenes, say, set in the kitchen, quite a few scenes set in the backyard. And so we would shoot all of those out one after the other. So for the kitchen, first 2 days of the shoot was all in the kitchen. And that's quite tough on actors, because we're having to get them to the end of the film, then the middle, and then the beginning, and then back to the middle, and then the end. And so they did an amazing job sort of changing their emotional, performance for each bit. And so all of that was very carefully planned out. And most of the film, we're looking into the theatre, and then we have a lot of perspective shots outside of the Wellington Opera House, which is a beautiful, famous opera house in New Zealand. It's built in 1890s. And so we got in there for 3 hours, and 6 weeks after we shot everything else. So we shot the whole film, and then we went through, and I got a list of all the shots that I wanted in the opera house. That was a lot more expensive. And then we went in and just knocked them out. Bang, 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 bang. And I think the only person who knew what was going on that day was me, because I had my list and had wonderful trust and faith from the actors for that. And yet, but I did want to feel like we're not watching a film version of a stage play. We actually, the first few shots are a little bit like that, and then we get into it, and almost a bit like Black Swan, where, where it's part of a theatrical production, but we're actually in with the character. And I wanted it to be totally cinematic. And the shots change. So they start a little wider, then they push in, and then we go sort of full cinematic with quite a limited depth of field, if you notice, for quite a lot of the last shots of the film, to have that real feeling that not only does it work cinematically, but we're also getting into the character Julia's emotional psyche of where she is.
Yeah. I want you to talk about your lead actress in the film, because, man, talk about, actors, of course, have, always have heavy lifting, no matter what they're doing performance-wise. But man, she really has heavy lifting in this, because of the idea of her playing an actor as well as being an actor. And so there's what she's doing within the context of the play. There's what she's doing within what's working on her mind, and when she comes out of it, and when she reacts, to the house, so to speak, versus the characters. Talk about your work with her and making sure that she stayed on point and and executed, because she's wonderful, amazing.
Oh, thank you. I'll definitely let her know that. Yeah, so her name's Greer Phillips. She's lovely, and she's just a nice and lovelier person in real life as she is in the in the show. But yeah, to be honest, if I didn't have an actor of Greer's caliber and Jane, who plays Mrs. Gross, the housekeeper, I wouldn't have gone ahead. I mean, we only have 6 actors in total, and this is a type of film that every single actor, including the wonderful children, we had to get it right. Otherwise, there's no room to hide. You know. So, I mean, Greer's primarily got a stage background here in New Zealand. She's done a lot of work in New Zealand and Australia. But she's also done a lot of film and TV as well. But I needed someone who had experience in both, who could do that. And Greer and I discussed the role, and she did a huge amount of preparation. So she had the entire, we almost rehearsed it like a stage play. So she knew every bit of it. And we practiced the difference between going from her stage character to the real character, Julia, because in the film, the actress sort of switches in and out, as things get worse for her. And so we shot it in such a short amount of time. So Greer was pretty tired by the end of the shoot, but she did an amazing job. But she's absolutely a total professional, and she's got a phenomenal memory, and she's great. Because some actors don't do, some actors, they'll say a line and they might be drinking their coffee, and it's going to be an editor's nightmare that they always move their coffee in a different bit, when you try to cut them together later. And you're like, you changed the hand or did something. Greer is like, she's so consistent. Once she gets it, once she has a certain way she wants to do it. So she would do the same thing, and if then for when we wanted to change, she would do that. And she's incredibly smart. And so I was able to just say, okay, we're going to this part of the script. And she was like, got you. And she would go to that and get herself in the emotional place she needed to be. So it's funny because of COVID, because this film got delayed in its release, she actually moved to Sydney, Australia. And so she wasn't here for our premiere and stuff, but our first one. But then because of the COVID delay, she's ended up moving back to New Zealand. And now she's like coming to all our screenings now, because even though we shot it, a couple of years ago. So because it was quite to say that she was hearing all these people and all her family saying, "Oh my God, we've seen you in the movie. You're great." And she hadn't seen it herself because,
wow.
we couldn't. It hasn't screened theatrically in Australia yet.
Right.
But thankfully, she's been back. She's back now, and she's seen it. But all our actors, I'm just so proud of all of them, and it was just a really pleasant shoot. And the older I get, I only want to work with people I like as much as and crew as well. I think we've all had experiences of like 1 or 2 actors or crew members that can make life very difficult.
Exactly.
And, you get into your 40s, life's too short for that. And I think the most talented people I've worked with are actually the most humble and the most open and generous to others. And so that's something I really like to push. So even if we make films that bad things happen, I like to think that everyone on the set has a really good time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. We're going to finish with 2 button questions. The first one is, you finish with your shoot, you come home, you're done, you're over it. What's the movie that you watch to reward yourself?
Oh, good question. Wow. I do love John Carpenter's The Thing. I just saw it again recently.
Nice. Yes.
It's a bit of a horror thing, but I just think that it's just such a good film. And the craftsmanship, I appreciate the actors, but if you look at the cinematography, the direction, the choice of shots, the atmosphere, the music, so that was one I saw after that that I'm a big fan of, and a guilty pleasure. I mean, no, it's not a guilty pleasure. It's a great film. It's a great film.
I'm with you on that one. I love that film. Okay, and your final one is popcorn or candy?
Oh, definitely popcorn for me.
All right. Strong answer. All right.
Lots of popcorn though, like a massive amount of popcorn.
Again, the film is Turn of the Screw. We've been talking with Alex Gavin, who the director of the film, which is screening right now at the Lake Travis Film Festival. Alex, it's been wonderful talking to you about this film.
Awesome. Thank you so much.